right. Hey, everyone. I'm Tanner from the investment team at the Legal Tech Fund. Today on In Studio, I'm joined by Vivek Rao, co founder and CEO of Foundation AI. Foundation AI is tackling a problem that sits at the very front door of law firms and claims departments, and that is document intake. Lawyers live in their inboxes and inbound emails, and the attachments are an unstructured mess. Vivek and his team are building the infrastructure that governs how documents enter the system. Foundation AI makes sure documents are profiled to the right claim, matter, make sure they're classified, named, saved, and turned into workflows automatically. So today we're going to unpack what Foundation AI is seeing across claims and injury litigation teams. We're going to unpack where automation delivers immediate impact versus where it struggles, and how structuring intake changes everything downstream, from data quality to workflow speed to who actually does the work. So, Vivek, it's great to have you in the studio. Let's kick off with where your journey in legal tech started.
Uh, yeah. So my journey in legal tech started, like a lot of lawyers, with law school. I wasn't actually a tech guy at all. Graduated law school in 2009. Originally started my career at an AM Law. Thought I was going to do capital markets and real estate finance work, but in 2010, there was no more capital markets or real estate finance work. So I ended up moving back to Los Angeles and started working with startups. But I wasn't great at running my own kind of operation. So I got a day job doing work comp defense. And that was the first time I saw just really high volume litigation. You know, we had thousands of open matters in our system. Every attorney had hundreds of cases at the same time, and we were just bombarded by documents. So while I was working there, I was also working with a number of startups. One of them was a healthcare AI company called Enlytics, and that was the first time I saw AI. And so, you know, building systems that could read fundoscopic images and detect diabetic retinopathy, and natural language processing models that could, you know, derive ICD-10 codes from clinical free text. Meanwhile, we had, you know, a 20-person team in our mailroom trying to keep up with the influx of documents and doing a pretty poor job at it. And so after the founders of Enlytics sold the business in 2017, they had a bit of a non-compete in healthcare, but a lot of domain expertise that I thought was germane and relevant, you know, to what I saw happening in legal. And so I was able to convince these much smarter tech guys to join me to try to solve some of these challenges for high volume litigation firms, the challenges that I saw working at a pretty large firm in California. And so that was the start around 2019. And so we actually started, you know, the company almost 7 years ago, and have been solving these problems for law firms for in production for over 6 years now.
I love it. I mean, let's fast forward to today then. For people who may not be familiar with Foundation AI yet, can you give us a picture of what the platform does, the problem it exists to solve inside, you know, law firms and claims teams?
Yeah, for sure. I kind of hinted at it just now, but the problem is that law firms are bombarded by documents. And we're pretty focused on consumer law firms and other high volume, high case count kind of practices, personal injury, work comp, SSD and VA benefits, claims litigation, property damage. So these are law firms that can have anywhere from 100 to 10,000 open matters in their system. And so they receive anywhere, you know, our clients from a couple hundred, a couple thousand documents a month to a couple thousand documents a day. And these aren't like the large like document productions or data dumps that you see in complex litigation where we have well-defined workflows and e-discovery tools. This is just a constant influx of separate correspondence from insurance companies, medical bills, pleadings that come in through the mail, you know, e-faxes. Some firms still have physical fax machines, just tons of documents pouring in. And so you can imagine the problem. Now that things have moved to digital systems where work gets done, each of these documents has to get essentially triaged and routed to the right place. And that is a pretty complex job. You know, I remember at the firm I was at one point I had 3 cases at the same time that were all the same caption, same plaintiff name, same defendant. And so the firm had 6. There were a couple of closed files in our system. So just getting something to the right matter is in itself a challenge. And then the right subfolder, right, getting in front of the right people, tasking, all of these workflows that now happen digitally, right, have to be orchestrated. And so that is the problem. Um, and you could think of Foundation AI, I think, is the connective tissue between all the documents that come into a law firm and the work that gets done. So, we are on one end integrated with all those ways documents come in. So the physical mail that gets scanned in, the centralized email boxes set up to receive e-faxes, all the individual email boxes across all the hundreds of clerks, paralegals, case managers, legal assistants, attorneys at a law firm. So on one end, all those ways documents come in. And then on the other, with the systems of action. And those are the places that work gets done. Often that's a practice management system, a document management system. And increasingly, it could be, like a sidecar separate AI system that actually is doing work itself. And so all these different systems. So our software ingests all the documents from one side upstream, and then it's going to match each document, like you said, to the correct file. It's going to classify each document. And then really based on that specific document classification and the firm's own desires, we're going to execute document-driven workflows. And that's routing to the right system, naming the document to the firm's naming convention, information extraction and data entry, saving it to the right folder or subfolder in the DMS, dynamically tasking the responsible attorney, staff member, or an AI system to take some action, right? And so this first mile of getting all the documents in, and like I said, we've been doing this for about 7 years, solving this problem. So
I love it. You touched on a few things, but it's worth double clicking on. Like as inbound document volume starts to scale, you mentioned a couple thousand documents a day can be coming in. What are some of the first things that break in teams that are still relying on manual intake and routing and trying to even go from a system of record to a system of action?
yeah, every law firm is a little bit different based on how they've addressed the problem, like manually or how in the analog fashion to where their kind of break point is. But we see some consistent themes. I think the first and most impactful is one that law firms often don't even realize, which is missing documents, right? Missing documents in the system of record. It's a massive growing problem for law firms. And for our clients, if they miss a document and they settle a case without a lien or something in the file, that comes out of their pocket. They're paying that at the end of it. And so one of the challenges now is that historically, you might have had a mailroom team and everything was coming in, physical mail with proofs of service. And that team, you could compel them to follow some standardized process. But now the majority of documents that a firm receives are actually coming in through email attachments. And there's no way to really audit or control or expect the individuals, like everyone in your firm who are receiving documents directly in their email boxes, to save everything into this system of record. Many times they're keeping them on their desktops. They'll get to it later and they forget, and so on. And even if you could get them to do it, if you could get people to save everything, and some firms have systems where they'll forward everything automatically to a team of people to solve for this that are supposed to do this. But it's really difficult to get people to follow the consistent kind of naming, foldering, tagging, tasking conventions, right? And so what we see, even if firms don't see it themselves, is just missing documents. And that really impacts the work product at the end of the day. That's a big one, I think. But some other key things that we hear a lot, and this is more salient, more law firms see this, and this is what they notice themselves are, a term that comes up a lot is document chaos. And that's attorneys who can't find what they're looking for, that they know the documents in, have seen it, but now when they're going back to find it, when they're preparing for trial, there's no consistency to the naming, the folder, and they can't find it. Also, if these things aren't consistently foldered, named, and data isn't entered consistently, very difficult for the firm to get firm-wide meaningful insights or analytics. They might have had a naming convention, but as the firm scaled up and got busy, that fell apart. Attorneys often are missing things because they're so bombarded by alerts. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's because in general, if you have a manual process, the manual team isn't going to remember very well every workflow. Like this type of document, you alert the case manager. This type of document, you alert the attorney. But this discovery, so that goes to the paralegal. Whereas an AI system can, you can teach it those rules or give it those rules, and it can just follow them at scale. And so attorneys, missing things is a big one. And then I think some firms that don't necessarily have the document chaos, it's because they are putting tremendous labor into this function. Whether that's a large dedicated team or often it's paralegals, it's legal assistants, it's paralegals spending a lot of their time, a lot of their day doing this, saving documents, naming things, keeping up with these foldering conventions. And these are people with very specialized skills that, could be doing a lot higher value work for the firm. So we see it all the time where, you know, someone on the triage level might be doing the first initial open and scan of a document, but then they have these complex workflows with all these handoffs where different people are spending a ton of time on this process. Um, and so I think one of the things that we see with these processes is that these carefully designed processes that look great on flowcharts, they often break. Each one of those handoffs is a failure point, which causes missed documents, late documents, delays, things like that. And a lot of the firms can't really get the value they thought they were going to get out of the expensive software they're buying. You're buying these modern practice management systems that have these great tools for analytics, but if no one's entering the data, you can't get analytics out of it, right? And you're buying these AI systems, but if documents are stuck in people's email boxes and not in the AI for it to be able to, summarize and incorporate into its reasoning, that doesn't do you much good. So I think that for a lot of firms, they're also seeing that they're buying these other systems, but it's like the age old, like garbage in, garbage out, without really solving the first mile. All these other systems, they don't work well. And any problem that happens in the first mile gets cascaded, through the process and compounded through whatever the workflows are. So a lot of different ways. I know it's a long answer for how this thing breaks, but we see a lot of different ways across firms that we work with.
That's awesome. So when you think about, solving the first mile, where does automation still struggle today? What kinds of documents or workflows remain the hardest to just standardize?
Yeah, and this is a moving target, right? We all know how fast AI is advancing, but one thing I think is that automation still struggles where humans struggle, right? Ambiguity, edge cases, workflows that rely on human judgment, like these are difficult for AI. Another big thing is AI is probabilistic, and the systems that we're working with, right, where work is getting done that the humans are using and where automation has to happen are deterministic, meaning they require structured inputs, and AI doesn't work well with those yet. I think one of the big keys here is not pretending that AI is perfect, which is what I see like some, especially like vibe coders kind of doing. It's really understanding, I think, where AI has its limitations and designing systems where AI can handle the increasing and increasing as the target moves majority of documents, but that whenever it's uncertain, that uncertainty is detected and routed appropriately. So it can be triaged. So what when the system is unsure so that humans can weigh in on that before it goes into the production system. And that's really how you get both scale and reliability. Right now, people, I hinted at the vibe coding thing, like people are really, a lot of people are talking about the LLM driven agents and LLMs and how, this is going to take out all software. I think LLMs are amazing at mimicking human reasoning, and they're essentially next word predictors. I'm sure you've heard this, right? They're really good at sounding intelligent because they're predicting the next word based on their training data. And so I think of these things often as like an actor playing a doctor. They sound amazing, they sound convincing, but they don't actually understand what they're saying. They might seem like they understand what they're saying and they're believable, but they don't. Now, the problem with LLMs and all the research, and Google just put out another paper about this on the 12th, about Google's DeepMind, about this exact phenomenon, but they're overconfident. These LLMs think they're right when they're wrong, and their self-reported confidence scores just have little bounding in factual reality, right? So a big problem here with like some of this purely LLM driven automation is they're sometimes wrong, and usually it's when it's ambiguous or when there's an edge case, but they're so sure they're right, and they're kind of indifferent to the consequences of being wrong. So that can, if you think about it, cause catastrophic results in industries like the law. There are ways to calibrate these models, right? We put a lot of work into that, and also using things other than just LLMs and like an ensemble approach to actually create reliable confidence scores in a system. So our AI system is a combination of things, including LLMs, but not just LLMs, so that we can derive like real confidence scores with the predictions our models make. And so in doing that, our system knows how to proactively task a human to validate decisions. But a lot of systems don't have this. And you either get like an output that, you're supposed to review everything, like, oh, people are supposed to review everything before they do it. But oftentimes people don't, or they think reviewing the whole document to see what could or can't be wrong takes longer than writing it themselves. So people just kind of don't do it. So you trust, that it was done right, or you deal with the consequences when it wasn't, which, for legal work, in these highly impactful decisions, like in which file this document goes into, that's a dicey proposition, a risky proposition, I think. And so that's a problem. Another just big one that people are still trying to work on now is the fact that I hinted at earlier, that these probabilistic AI systems have to perform automation, not in the abstract, but across the systems that people actually work in. And, most law firms that we work with are using FileVine, Litify, Salesforce. These are highly configurable, deterministic software systems that these law firms are configuring to their own specs, right? They're putting fields in their own places. It's very complex. And in these enterprise systems, they're structured, they're schema bound, transactions require validation and sort of format based entry. And AI is very bad at handling this. And so, some of the things that AI agents are very good at, because they're probabilistic, flexible, contextual, they're great at chatting, summarizing, drafting, but they're not great at producing like a replicable result every time from an input. And that's what you sort of need for workflow automation. And so the mismatch, I think, causes a lot of integration as you get into this idea of automating workflow within the confines of these software systems that, enterprises and law firms have to operate within. There's a host of other kind of challenges, but probably beyond my technical pay grade. But suffice to say, the agents aren't great at complex integration with enterprise systems. And so I think the way to sum this up and to account for that is to use AI like what we do at Foundation AI. Is our proprietary AI models, like they handle the perception, the understanding, so that classification of documents, information extraction, the matter matching. We attach confidence scoring to everything that we do so that uncertainties and edge cases are routed to a human to resolve. And then once something is validated, either because the system was confident enough or a human validated it, then we have a deterministic software layer, we have a lot of software engineers building this that actually handles the API integration and all of that with the core downstream systems. And so, once something is validated, the system handles all that. So the AI sort of understands, and then software still handles most of the execution so that it can be done with proper audit trails, with proper retries, with all the things that you need for enterprise grade software to ensure that it's working effectively. So
That's awesome. So Vivek, in part of what you just touched on, thinking about the future of, this technology interacting with enterprise systems, to bridge from today into the future, when Foundation AI is kind of the connective tissue today, from what you're seeing, how does better document intake infrastructure meaningfully change or impact the day-to-day experience for claims handlers, attorneys, and other knowledge workers?
yeah, I think first, documents don't go missing, right? I mean, that's probably the most important one, is everything is captured, routed effectively. And, when you don't miss, if you're a law firm in our space, like consumer law firm, if you don't miss liens and bills, you're not paying out of pocket. And that's huge, right? I think I would say with our software, the goal here as being the connecting tissue is that documents, information, everything just flows faster, more accurately, more consistently. And so everything's processed, named, saved the same way. And that generally makes, staff, law firms, people working happy, right? It's important to note, though, like with our software, that attorneys don't actually touch it themselves. They get the results of our software, but they themselves are not operating in it. With our software, it's designed so that at steady state, any exception handling necessary, we talked about the human validation, can be done either by us or the law firm with the people, usually with like an entry-level person, can handle that exception handling. And so these law firms now see that their paralegals, their legal assistants are now freed up to focus their time on that more impactful work. And for law firms, that's huge because right now, if you ask any firm, and I ask all the time, like, is it easy to find good people? No one will raise their hand. And so if you've got someone that shows up to work, that isn't on TikTok all day, that has the attention to detail to do this job, chances are there's a lot more impactful things that are more intrinsically motivating to them and more like beneficial to the firm that they could be doing. And so a lot of firms get that benefit by being able to do a lot more with the same staff. Right. And that's a big one. I think another big advantage just, with solving this is, and I'm getting in the kind of the nuances, is the downstream impact for just all the attorneys and all the knowledge workers. Like something as simple as dynamic alerting that I alluded to earlier. Like oftentimes in the law firms we work with, just because it's manual, a document comes in and they just like email it to everyone on the case team, right? And so the attorney, everyone. And this is let's say a medical bill. And the attorney doesn't need to look at every single medical bill that comes in. And, the case manager doesn't need to look at the pleading because they're not going to be the one answering it, and so on. So with an AI-based system, because all of that workflow and all of those rules are just built into the business logic, right? That can all be automated and it can be done more granularly. So discovery pleading comes in, that goes to the paralegal. A pleading that comes in goes directly to attorney. Bills come in and they go directly to the people that need to see them. And so each of those people gets what they need to see, but they don't see all the stuff they don't need to see. And that means that they're not bombarded by an overflow of stuff where they're context shifting to look, do I need to see this? No, it doesn't matter to me. And they can focus on the work that they're actually doing. And that makes people a lot happier as well. I think for the firms themselves, like for a firm owner, especially in these high volume kind of practice areas that we operate in, if you want to scale, just like any other business that wants to scale, you need standardized SOPs. You need people following a playbook, and you need that playbook run every time. And, process is very hard to put in when you have people and you need a lot of people to execute it. And it adds, every one of those steps is another failure point. So I think that, using a system like ours, or our system, you're able to instantiate all of this and take people out of all of these various failure points and just build it to a tightly operating system that just runs itself. And any system, any process is only as good as your bottleneck. And if your bottleneck is in the first mile, then any problems there, any mistakes, they're just going to keep compounding all the way through. And so by solving for it at the outset, you solve that garbage in, garbage out problem. You end up with clean data in your system, documents in the right place, and it enables, not just people to work more effectively, but even other AI systems and other automation to work more effectively when, your first mile is solved. So I think that's a lot of it. I can talk about this stuff forever, but yeah.
I love it. It's fantastic stuff. Vivek, thank you so much for joining us in studio. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.